Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer podcast. Jordan, man, I've been looking forward to this episode for quite a long time because there's like, when I run these episodes, like there's some people that I really don't know at all. Like maybe we met that day, maybe we've like never really even chatted outside of like the whole podcast thing. Yeah. And then there's people like yourself where I slid into your DMs back in January and we went out to eat in LA, got to know each other. We've become good friends ever since then. And so we've had a number of discussions about a lot of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. But this time we're going to be doing it on the podcast, a little bit different, and so I'm excited for this. But Jordan, for people who don't know who you are, can you give a brief intro to yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jordan Yallen, CEO of Meditope, and it's an honor to be here.
There we go, man. Glad to have you here. So give everybody a little bit of background about yourself, because I know a few things. So you're currently an attorney, right? Not practicing, but you're currently an attorney. Yep. And then you're a former minor league baseball player. Am I right on that?
You are correct.
There we go. So how do you go from, so walk me through your timeline, right? Do you go to college? Do you get drafted? Walk me through the whole MLB draft, how you get into law school and everything like that.
Okay. So October 15th, 1990, I was born in Tarzana Hospital. No. Just aged myself for half of the demo. So I grew up playing baseball. Tight-knit family, grew up playing baseball, and I was fortunate enough to be drafted out of high school by the Chicago White Sox. Late round pick, went to school, ended up signing with the White Sox after college. And that was my first season in 2015. After my first season, I started an e-commerce business, selling rare fish for aquariums. I'm sure you might have a question on that.
So. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yep. We gotta talk about that. So how does that happen? How does that start?
I had a fish tank in college, as one does, and I made some connections because I was like, oh, what makes something rare? Why does a fish sell for $20,000 and some sell for $5? Did some research. I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of cool what goes into it. So I started looking into these things. I started reaching out to divers, like trying to buy stuff myself, and decided that after I made all these connections, is actually my dad's suggestion, saying like, hey, why don't you turn this into a business, because you could run it from the road while you're playing ball. So actually in my law school personal statement during my applications, I mean, it's a true story. When I was with the Cincinnati Reds during spring training, I'm sitting there trying to close a $32,000 deal for these fish while like I look over and the guy next to me is playing Candy Crush. And it was a little different. I mean, that's just how I was kind of raised. It was just, I'm fascinated by business and making deals. So that was me while I was playing ball. Fortunate enough to play for like 2.5 years. After my second season, I had 3 hip surgeries in 5 months. And between my first and second surgery, I had a few weeks and I saw the writing on the wall. So I figured, okay, let me apply to law school. It was always, everybody asked like, oh, hey, what's your plan B? If you don't make it in pro ball, what's your plan B? And I would always clarify, it's my next step. It's not my plan B. I'm going to play as long as I possibly can. But once I'm done, I'm going to go to law school. And I always knew I wanted to go to law school. I knew I didn't want to practice law. I just wanted to use it to be more beneficial than an MBA and think like an attorney. My dad's an attorney, but he's in the business world. I've seen how valuable it is for him, and I wanted to do the same. So I took the LSAT, studied for 3 weeks, took the LSAT, applied, and did fair. Didn't do as great as I wanted to do, but good enough. Tried to after my rehab, tried to go back and play. Lasted 3 games, could barely walk. That was July of 2017, and 3 weeks later, in August of 2017, I was sitting in at Loyola Law School in downtown LA, and in my first class.
Damn, that's a wild. Okay, so we go from minor league baseball to selling fish to law school. So that's one hell of a journey. So okay, wait, I gotta talk about the fish more for a second. So how did you? Like, you just started contacting divers. Were you selling fish to people who were putting them in their home, or was this like restaurants that, like, really upscale restaurants that wanted fish for that? Like, who was your clientele?
Yeah, so not to be eaten. These are totally like collector's items. I mean, you want to talk about like degenning, right? You're dealing with $20,000 to $35,000 fish, and these guys are spending this on a living item that, like, if there's a power outage, these things could die. If a box gets lost in transit, like, that's pretty gnarly stuff. It's not like the project gets rugged and at least you get like maybe a couple bucks out of it. Like, it's go big or go home. And made really interesting connections. You need, like, I saw a niche in the space like that was really needed, and just kind of the way my brain works. I'm like, hey, nobody really specializes in rare fish, so I created a company that's all we did. It was $500 orders and above, and met some fascinating people. So yeah, I had divers in Hawaii, Australia, Indonesia, really all over the world. And then I also had clients that were just all over the country, fascinating people from dentists to hedge fund managers to really any type of person you can imagine. And it was a really interesting cross section because you had mostly highly successful people. Some people, like, this is what their one hobby was, and they used all their disposable income toward it. But on the other end, they're also nerdy and can appreciate these rare items. Can't name names, but there was I worked with a friend on an account who one of the richest people in the country, lives over in Malibu. Incredible, beautiful tank that cost $1 million, and he didn't care the fish that was in. I'm like, oh, this is a great customer. I'm going to sell millions of dollars worth of fish. No, he didn't care. He just wanted pretty fish, as opposed to these other guys that they didn't necessarily have that kind of disposable income, but like this was their thing, and they were so passionate about it. And that's what I really appreciated. It was like really fun to work with these guys that, like, hey, they were chasing these things for years. I'm able to find one with this random diver, and make sure that everything's done like the right way. Under like there are a lot of sketchy things in that industry. One of the reasons why I left, but you're dealing with living creatures, and it has to be done the right way. So I made sure to do that, and eventually took the bar exam while I was waiting. I ended up passing, fortunately. While I was waiting for my bar results, ended up selling the company and moving on to the next chapter of my life.
Well, so that's going to be my new excuse. Anytime anybody says, like, so you're all in on this NFT space, like, there are people who are really willing to spend like $20,000 on a JPEG, and I'm going to respond back and be like, there are people who are willing to spend $32,000 on a fish that's going to die at some point. So at least my NFT can live on forever. So that's going to be my new shill point, actually. So thank you for that.
I got you.
I appreciate that. That's wild, though. I mean, it really is. It reminds me, I guess, that there's like a luxury market for everything, right? Like, that we see, like, as a guy, I look at like purses, and I'm like, I can't imagine dropping, a crazy amount of money on a purse, right? And I'm the type of guy that, like, when I'm on vacation in like Hawaii, this is embarrassing, but I truly do this every year. I literally take like a grocery store bag, and that's like my beach bag for the week. And so everyone makes fun of me every year, but I'll like put my iPad in there so I can read a book, and I'll put my sunglasses, my sunscreen, and a beer or whatever, and I'll put all of it in a grocery bag, and I just take that with me. The utility of a grocery bag is incredible. And so I look at, when someone's dropping a crazy amount of money on a purse, I'm like, God, I just can't imagine dropping that kind of money on something like that. But obviously that market's not for me. Right. Same thing with the exotic fish market. Like, I can't imagine dropping $32,000 on a fish, but I can imagine dropping $32,000 on a JPEG, right? So it just, I guess, puts everything into perspective of, like, it's all from your own individual viewpoint. Like, some things are going to sound crazy to you that are going to sound completely normal to somebody else. So it is what it is. But okay, so then you end up going to law school, and what were you? What type of law were you studying?
I had a corporate concentration. So everybody basically studies the same general eds, and then you can have some type of specialty. But I did a lot of work in privacy law. That was right around the time where GDPR was coming out, actually it was implemented and was about to be enforced. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the European Union's overhaul on privacy. That's when you started seeing like the cookies notifications and all that stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so that came into effect, I think, end of 2018, beginning of 2019, I want to say. And then I did like transactional, general, like business related law because I knew I didn't want to practice traditionally, and that would be most useful to me is reading contracts, redlining, knowing, UCC and general law.
And were you ever at any point what were you planning on doing with the law degree after you graduated?
So for a time, I thought about practicing in a firm for a little bit. But then I knew that would be hell. Just last thing I wanted to do. After that, I ended up working in real estate transactions for a bit while I started Meditope and started kind of brainstorming things. And the nice thing about that, it was a hybrid role of the business side and the legal side. So I would negotiate the operating agreement. I'd be able to redline it and really and then at the same time be able to run models and see, hey, did this meet our strategy, our investment strategy. So it was a really good balance of practical business and legal experience in a short amount of time. Kind of got thrown into the fire.
It really is wild to think about like the benefits of something like that without like really having to necessarily like go into law as like a profession afterwards. Cause like I even think about like when I first messaged you, I remember seeing attorney in your bio and I was like, it's never a bad thing to know an attorney. Right. And I honestly think that might've been the biggest reason why I DM'd you. Cause I was just like, I have so much of an appreciation for people who are able to go to law school, like put the amount of time and energy into it. And I feel like every time I've met an attorney, they're like super detailed people. They're like, you can always depend on them. Like they're very like detail oriented. And I was just like, I don't know. I've always liked attorneys, but every time I meet them, I just enjoy them. And so,
not many people can say that.
Yeah, that's facts. Cause usually they're meeting them for the wrong reasons, but yeah, no. So I was like, that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you. But okay. So then, I guess, like, how do you end up getting into, like, crypto and NFTs and all of that from there?
So, beginning of 2017, Coinbase allowed you to buy Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. I would take profits from my fish sales whenever I had a big fish sale, and I would start to dollar cost average into those three tokens, more heavily into Ethereum because I read up on it. I'm like, oh, this seems to be the future. You can build on it. Learned about smart contracts and kept just kind of being a student of the industry. I started law school and later on that year, and the Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Startups Club had a speaker. The speaker came in and started talking about what you can do with smart contracts and where the future of the blockchain was going. And it just like that moment, I'm like, I need to do something in this. I don't know what. I have no clue. But I need to not only just invest in this, but like actually build something in this because I felt like it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's cutting edge technology and would revolutionize most things we touched. And a lot's changed since 2017.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So talk about that from there. How do you end up getting into crypto or into NFTs?
Yeah. So again, I was a student of the space. And my family is an ad agency. Like I grew up in an ad agency that my grandfather started 49 years ago. My dad runs now. My sister's in it. And I would go home from school, and this is the way my brain has always worked. I'd pick my dad's brain about like, what'd you do today? What clients are causing problems? Who are you pitching? All of that. And I was fascinated by the business element, but I saw how stressful being in the agency business is. You are totally at the beck and call of your clients. And if an AG of a state goes after a client, they cease advertising like that. Those are dollars out of your pocket. It's a really volatile, tough business to be in. It can be great and it can be terrible. And I always had this like sense of obligation to that heritage. It's really cool. Half a century in an industry that's my family, right? And but I never wanted to be in direct response advertising. So I figured like, okay, well, there are all these resources here. There are all these incredible people that are affiliated with this business. And I can take this to another level. So I always wanted to like start something as part of that, but not that was tangential and that could take it to this next phase, which in my opinion is Web 3. All right, it's very Web 1 and Web 2. Now it's, okay, Web 3, how do we take a traditional media company, use that infrastructure that's there, use this budding technology and budding industry, and bring it to the next level of where things are going, and actually like be a pioneer in the space, because that's what my grandfather did in the early days of TV advertising. That's what my dad did in the internet days, and hey, here I'm trying to do something. So at that time, let's see, this was end of 2020, beginning of 2021. I'm like trying to figure out, hey, can we do commercials as NFTs? I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? A commercial is a fixed time slot that you sell. It's relatively liquid and it has a value. I mean, Super Bowl spots, right? There's supply and demand. Why can't we do something like that? So I started to do something like that. It's like, okay, that's crazy change in an industry that moves slowly, and really moves slowly. So, okay, what's next? Okay, well, hey, what if we mint an NFT and use AR for every fish species? Let's do that. Well, okay, that's a small audience.
Very niche, yeah.
Very niche. At least it lives forever.
Facts.
So then looking at different things, I come across these virtual influencers. There's Lil Miquela. There are all these different virtual influencers. And you look at the VTuber audience in Japan, and it's a huge thing.
Wait, what did you call it?
VTuber?
What is
VTubers?
that?
They're virtual YouTubers.
Okay.
People wear like the Rococo suits and have the cameras and all the sensors, and they have huge audiences. And same, this Lil Miquela. Are you familiar with Lil Miquela?
Yeah.
Okay, so she has 3 million plus followers.
I'll put a photo up for people to see. Yeah.
There she is.
Yep.
And it's this really interesting phenomenon where at the time, and I'm sure things have changed a little bit, but virtual influencers would get 3 times the engagement as a living, tangible person. And it was really fascinating to me, and I didn't know why. But then I'm seeing the rise of like PFPs, right? And this is a technology that's utilizing NFTs and smart contracts. I'm like, this is such a special technology. People are just using it as a representation of themselves on Twitter. Like, we can do a lot better. So what can we do? I started doing a ton of research, right? What can we do with our cell phone, right? You have Snapchat, like face filters, things like that. What can we do with our cell phone and combine these idea of these like NFTs that are revolutionary and stagnant profile picture images, like the most basic use case for an NFT? How do we make this like become an actual identity for someone rather than just, hey, here's my standard like profile picture that I could have had when I had an AIM screen name?
And so, okay, so from there, yeah, because when I think about that, right, like the evolution of like essentially digital identity, right, has changed over time. Because I think about, like, if I pause and think about it, I'm like, okay, my AIM screen name growing up, mine was Born to be in the NBA, okay, which did not work out for me. Yeah, I ended up 5'7", white and unathletic, which really didn't contribute well to an NBA career. So that didn't work out for me. And then, yeah, boy, did that not pan out. So don't really know what. There must be another NBA somewhere because Born to be in the NBA. So National Bacon Association, maybe. But so I think about that. Then I think about the from there, it felt like Instagram honestly, then you think about like MySpace and you think about like Top 8, right? And like that was your like digital identity of like your friendship with people, right? Like, oh shit, you left me out of your Top 8, like what the hell, right?
Oh, we'd negotiate for spots.
Yeah, that was wild. And then you think about like you get into Instagram and now all of a sudden, like at the beginning, like Instagram was this like incredibly important thing. I feel like over time Instagram's kind of lost a little bit of its luster, but at the beginning, like Instagram was this huge thing. People were super excited about it, everything like that. There was like people were paying crazy amounts of money to get like, instead of like having Marc Colcer as my Instagram name, to have like just Marc, people were paying like $20K, $50K to get stuff like that. Some were paying even more than that. Then you think about like, PFPs has kind of become in crypto Twitter has become this huge thing, right? Where all of a sudden you've got these characters that like represent you, but they don't always look like you. And it's interesting to me because like for some people that sounds kind of crazy. Like there's probably gonna be somebody who's listening to this who's like, I just don't get how like a PFP that doesn't look like you can represent you, right? I would counter to that when you think about like video games that you've played over the years. Like most people have played like NBA 2K, something like that. Usually when you create a player, I think there are some people who make a character who looks just like them. I think there are a lot of characters who kind of go, dude, if I could be somebody else, what would I create, right? And so when I think about like my PFP on Twitter, it looks nothing like me. Guy's got like bleach blonde hair with like beard, and it's like neither one of those characteristics I have, right? But yet my PFP represents me. I would have a really hard time changing that PFP, right? So I guess like how did you see? You talk about kind of looking into like the tech, looking into like the opportunity there. Did you start buying and selling a bunch of NFTs? I guess like how did you start like getting yourself acclimated into the whole culture?
A lot of research. I am the kind of person that doesn't like to just measure twice and cut once. I measure like 15 times, and then I measure once more, and then I cut. So a ton of research, go into all these different Discords, and I had a friend that was very big into Cardano, and he's like, hey, I just bought these NFTs. I think they're cool. You should check them out. I'm like, you know what? These look cool. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to finally take the plunge. And that was opening up a can of worms. But yeah, I started off buying Cardano NFTs, which I don't know if
you don't hear that often. I don't know if anybody's ever said that on this podcast. So,
or at least admitted it.
Yeah. So you start off in Cardano.
Yep.
Did you get into Ethereum from there, or how did it go?
Yeah, Ethereum. Then I bought some Solana and more Ethereum. Kind of dabbled in everything. I mean, I do believe in a cross-chain future. I think there are plenty of people building in all sorts of different places that have very, very valuable things to contribute to the space.
So for somebody who's like so detail-oriented and whatnot, how did you look into a project? Like, how did you determine if this was something that was worth putting your money into?
I think it depended on the day, because sometimes it's like, you know what, I will do research until I talk myself out of it, or then I'm totally convicted and I have just all this conviction where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go all in, and then the project's a rug. So yeah, generally do the opposite of what I do, but it's kind of funny. Like I either spend all the time in the world like dissecting every element of it, or just be like, my gut says go with it, and usually like the gut play ends up being better for me.
Fair. Okay, so when did you buy your PFP?
So I have my mutant that I bought in October of 22.
Okay. And was there like a certain reason why you decided to make that PFP your PFP? I mean, obviously like a mutant is a very expensive NFT. And so there's kind of like the baller factor of that, but like, was that your rationale?
So I loved the community aspect. And I wasn't going to buy an OG ape. I like, okay, let me buy a mutant. And I was looking, and I spent months looking. Like, and the PFP thing is a very interesting conundrum because it's committing to something. I mean, you look at research, and you take a substantial hit when you change your profile picture. Some people, like you, probably can never change their profile picture.
It would be tough.
Yeah, and so I spent months looking for the right mutant once I decided I wanted one. The main reason I wanted one was more than just going to Ape Fest or anything like that. I loved the community. And I think really, I mean, what Yuga's done and what D-Labs have done as far as community is really something to admire. And that was the main reason why I bought that mutant. But it took a long time of trying to find the right ones. And I saw it, and then somebody sniped it right before I was about to buy it, and I was devastated. And then they relisted it for like 0.5 ETH more 2 days later, and I was like, all right, I'm in. Is that like I was going to sleep? It's like 1:30 a.m. After a long day working, and I saw it. I'm like, shoot, I'm buying it now because it's gonna be gone before I wake up, and I bought it.
And is there like, do you have this sort of level of like infatuation with your PFP where you're like, I will not change it?
Well, as a project founder, I'm probably going to have to change it one day, but it's gonna be very bittersweet. Yeah.
Fair. Okay, and we'll get into Meditope, more of what that is in a second here. But okay, so I want to go back for a second because you graduate from law school. You've now got this law degree. You have the ability to do pretty much anything, right? What was, I guess, like that moment for you? Did you have a moment where you were like, I think it's worth really, really going all in on this? Like, I know you talked about earlier, like having the ability to really make an impact. Like, was that something where you thought to yourself, like, this is my thing? Like, I'm going to be able to make an impact after spending time kind of in these communities and stuff like that. What was your like epiphany moment of like, this shit is legit?
It's a good question. It took really case studies, I'd say, and just analysis of the market. So over a span of about 6 months, once I decided on what Metatope ended up becoming, this kind of merge between digital identities and virtual influencers, I spent 6 months finding the right team, the right people to build this, and look at other projects, see what was out there, see, hey, what's needed, right? Because you have at that time all this money flowing into this space, and it was a cluster. Like there were so many different things, so many projects, everybody promising the world, very few people delivering, and that to me was, I mean, I think we all, I mean, eventually we saw it coming, what ended up happening with this bear market, but to me, that was exceptionally powerful in this kind of aha moment where there's something here. This is special, and it's whoever is able to capitalize on it most is going to win, regardless of the bull or the bear. Right, the bear market is just going to shake out a lot of the projects that didn't belong, and those who can actually build are going to win in the long term. So, yeah, it would have been nice to launch in a full-fledged bear market, but this, I think, is good. The cream's going to rise to the top. That aha moment, to answer your question, came after about 6 months of just heavy research, monitoring things. Even when things just tanked, it's like, okay, this is still a play. And a lot of it came also from just talking to people, right? They're like, oh, I see that. Or we debuted at NFT NYC in 2022 after a year of just totally in stealth mode. And we had a booth where we had our tech, and I cried tears of joy along with Walker and a couple other guys on the team, because we'd been working on this for so long. Seeing people actually have like experience joy from something that we created was surreal. It was really surreal, just playing with our tech and like these big old smiles. Like that was special. And that was that second, like, okay, we bet a lot on this. Now we're seeing people enjoy it and just genuinely like childlike almost emotions coming out. This is cool. This is special.
So, okay, so I want to talk about Meditope in a sec, but what I want to get into is like, okay, so when you were looking at the space, I guess, where did the idea of, we talk about digital identity. Can you first give a summary of like what Meditope is, like a quick 30-second spiel of like, this is what Meditope is. And then I want to talk about from there, most NFT projects, when they've got the idea, they go, okay, hey, you know what? Especially because you talked about, you had been working on Meditope for how long before NFT New York last year?
So I officially started working on Meditope in about March of 2021. NFT NYC last year was June 2022.
Okay, so you've basically been working on your project now for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Which is unheard of in this space. We usually hear somebody's like, I've been working on my project for 2 months, okay? Yeah. And then they go and they mint it, and because their goal is to mint out, right? And that for a lot of people is like what they view as like a success. Like, oh, I minted out, congrats, right? I don't view that as any sort of accomplishment. I look at it of like, cool, you minted out. Even if you didn't mint out, I don't really care. The real journey is after that, because now you have holders who put their money into your project. So whether you have 10,000 holders or 2,000 holders, it doesn't really matter at that point. You have people who want to see that project do well, right? Yep. And so there's inherently this pressure of like, I've got this idea. I want to go and mint this immediately because I want the money to run this business, right? So for yourself, how did you, like, first off, give a summary of what Meditope is, and then second, how did you stay patient enough to really take the last 2 years to build it and not just rush to mint?
I'm going to answer the second question first.
Go for it.
Very fortunate to have Intermedia as our parent company because they have a ton of resources that we've been able to utilize, like team members. I mean, their in-house counsel has been instrumental. Their COO has been instrumental, and really be able to leverage everything that they have there already has been huge, let alone the ability to bootstrap this all of ourselves and not have to take on outside investors. And that came in stages, had to really demonstrate solid plans and every step along the way, and how to cope with development setbacks, all of that. To answer your kind of from a 30,000 foot overview of what Meditope is, I always like to preface it with saying that it's a tech company. It's a blockchain tech company mainly focused on infrastructure. So the idea of a PFP being a two-dimensional, flat, stagnant image isn't going to last very long. The future that we believe is the interconnectivity and interoperability among these digital assets. So what we've built is we have several patents filed, and one of them is how we bring these assets to life. So rather than having a 2D image and photoshopping it onto your body, like most people do, I've seen you do it, even though I don't know why you would. Look at you, but
same to you.
Oh, thank you. And rather than doing that, the idea of you becoming a virtual influencer in your own right, and just using the technology you carry around in your pocket every day, a smartphone, and replacing yourself in media as your NFT and bringing it to life, whether you're doing a TikTok dance or smiling with friends, whatever it is. So Meditope offers a solution for that. We offer technology that's called markerless motion capture technology. So I'm sure you've seen like the behind the scenes stuff on Avatar where they're wearing all those suits with the dots all over their face and the ping pong balls in their body. That's not markerless because there are markers. What we've done is we take a smartphone and we look at all the points from your face to your fingertips, every bone in your fingers, your entire body, and we retarget that to a 3D model and then animate and bring it to life in real time. So the difference between that and what you generally get on a Snapchat or an Instagram filter is usually that only does your face or only does your body. We're able to do everything simultaneously, so your body, your hands, and your face. And so that is one big element. The other side is all the infrastructure that goes into it. So rather than just social media, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I'm sure, when we dive further into digital identity, like not everybody is going to want to be a monkey or a Ute or a DGOT or whatever running around on TikTok, right? That's not for everybody. But there are also gamers. There are also people that are maybe self-conscious about their appearance, or they're just having a bad hair day and want to be on a Zoom call as their digital identity. So the infrastructure that we put in there, from the markerless motion capture technology to the storage of 3D models and associated accessories, right? You can change out clothing options, whatever, once you go 3D. That alone is so needed in this space because every platform has a different standard. And there are standardization processes that a lot of people don't necessarily adhere to. We have the ability to facilitate creators and platforms with using certain standards and calling the right model based on that environment with this infrastructure that we've built. So that's the really long-winded short answer to what the heck we do. So technology, storage, content management, 3D model management, markerless motion capture. And then we also have our own NFTs. So put that together, that's Meditope.
There we go. So can we put a video? Will you be able to send me something that I can put? Okay. So I'll put a video here for you guys to see what it looks like. And obviously I've used the tech and it's very cool. So where do you see it evolving to? Because currently, if somebody, like when Metatope mints, which, do you know exactly when you guys are minting yet?
I don't want to put anything out there quite yet.
Okay, so minting at some point, probably in 2023, we can safely assume?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
safely assume that. So when you guys mint, people will have the ability to choose what to be their animated self.
So we have a line, we call them empty skins. So empty is short for Metatope, but also you say quickly, it sounds like empty, EMPTY. And we want people to fill these identities, let them become whoever they want to be, whether it's just like you or this person that you want to aspire to while you're online. So we want people to be there to tell their own stories. And a lot of this came from our artists. We're really fortunate to have a guy named Jared Morantz if you look up his IMDb, like one of the most impressive IMDbs you've ever seen, the guy designed Thanos and Batman and Spider-Man, and I feel like he did Superman, Planet of the Apes, like before Bored Ape was a thing. He designed the apes for Planet of the Apes. Guy's amazing. And a lot of people say they have like a Marvel and DC artist on their team, and they're like the modelers that get a design. Well, this is the guy that provides that design for people to actually build. So it's really, really cool to actually be able to work with him. So he's designed this world that will be our collection. And the reason we're launching a collection is because this is how we demonstrate our tech. We can't just throw a Bored Ape in there and expect everybody to come in and play. The best way to do it is say, hey, here's what we're doing. Let's show you guys. But then at the same time, in the long run, I see this as a product that will benefit communities and benefit holders in the space, right? So you identify with your DGOT, you're not going to buy one of our skins and utilize it on social media. I mean, maybe you'll do me a solid, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
I got you.
But for the most part, most people identify with one specific PFP, and that's not everybody. But we provide that ability for other people to do it. I mean, I do think at least where the market currently is, without many new entrants to the market, it's going to be hard for any new PFP collection to actually make it. It's going to be difficult. I think really the future is providing use cases for existing communities, tapping into those existing fan bases and benefiting Web3, or not even Web3, it's Web 2.5 at this point, as a whole, and moving it forward. And I think tech is the best play.
So, okay, so I want to run this through because I have a few ideas on that. So obviously when I think about this initially, I'm like, okay, if I could get to the point where I could do like an intro to my podcast as my DGOD, right? Like I think that would be really, really cool, right? Yeah. But the tech of like, it's not as simple. Like there's probably somebody who's listening to this who's like, well, that'd be super dope if I could just like upload my PFP and then it instantly gets a 3D model of my PFP and then I can use that as myself in a video or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about like what does that 3D modeling process look like and why is that so difficult that like you can't just like upload a JPEG and then be that JPEG a second later in a 3D model video?
Yeah, so there are lots of projects now that offer 3D models, but you can't really do anything with them. That's the big problem. I mean, look at a big fan of, and now there are some positives and some negatives, but take CloneX.
Yeah.
Like I liked what they did in the beginning, right? It was a very different approach. I mean, have Nike backing them, so it's pretty impressive. But you get your 3D model that people waited a year for, and you have to be sophisticated in either Blender or Maya, or some type of rendering engine, be good at animation, and in order to actually use it. Some people ended up being able to use them as face filters on Snapchat, but that was really about it for the average person. And I don't think that's how you get to mass adoption, right? That's not something that the average person can go in and use and benefit from that technology. You also have other projects that don't necessarily release optimized models, which you need in order to actually be able to render, or even have rigged models. They just release 3D models. So in order to have a usable 3D model, you need to have a base mesh that is a certain amount of polygons that can be processed based on the technology you're using. So for example, we're doing all this based on a mobile phone. So we have a target threshold or a maximum of 60,000 polygons. Now that's the number that we've come to that we say, okay, basically that 95% of all devices on the market are going to be able to run this. We want it to be, I mean, not everybody, some people have iPhone 6s and they kind of probably need to upgrade, but in order to be able to use this, it's not as easy as just like running it through a generator and right now and spitting out a 3D model. I know I've seen people, I'm sure you've been to NFT shows or other CES, different places where they scan you with like 360-degree cameras, or they have an iPad and they walk around. The issue with that is it creates a model that is the topography of the model, so like where the polygons are really jagged effectively, right? So they have a ton of polygons, or on the converse, they're not detailed in the right way. The technology hasn't quite gotten there to actually be able to generate a 3D model that easily. Now, I think with ChatGPT and everything going on, eventually you'll get optimized models, but it really relies on these artists to mess with the topology. And you have different things like height maps and bump maps. We're able to fake in topology, the way the polygons are laid out, and I mean topology. You know what topology is. Yeah. And that will allow the model to actually be usable. Plus, you have to rig it, which means like you put actual like basically bones in where they need to be so that you can actually move the thing around. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it did. So, okay, so then my question would be like, do you see at some point us having like a, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but do you see us having like some sort of 3D model standard at some point where basically somebody could take the Metatope technology, right? And there could be this Metatope standard, right? Of like, if you want your D-God or if you want your mutant ape or your whatever to be able to be utilized in this, in Metatope, right? You've got to meet this, like, you have to have an art file that meets this standard. And like this, and once you have that standard, you could essentially utilize it using Meditope. Do you see that being a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple different standards though. So you have a standard based on file type, right? OBJ, FBX, GLT, F, GLTB, whatever, right? There are all these different types of file types, depending on the environment. You also have rigging conventions. So the names of the bones, how many bones there are, where they are, that's on its own. You have polygons, right, that we just talked about. So you have all these different conventions that you need to standardize. It's not like we're starting from scratch, though. There are different standards for different environments. So what we're doing is we're using those existing standards, and when they don't exist, we're creating our own. But the idea is that if you're able to use the Meditope infrastructure, you can go anywhere. Now, again, it's going to be like our strategy on phones. Okay, 95% is probably good enough.
Yeah. Okay. So then do you see, I guess, where do you see this evolving to? Like in a perfect world, a year from now, because I'll go a year. Usually I say with the NFT space, like, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 months or whatever? Yeah. But with this, like 3D modeling is still something that's like very new still. And like it's not at the point of like any sort of like mass adoption yet or anything like that. So where do you see this going in a year? Like what would you like Meditope to be able to do in a year?
So right now it's a heavy lift manually. It's not an insane lift, but it's a heavy lift manually to integrate other projects. We're talking to a bunch of projects. We're building out models for other projects, and that's completely manual right now. We're building some automation tools, and it's going to happen step by step. The first logical step is probably a rigging automation tool. And not only will that benefit us, but that'll benefit other collections if they want to spend their own time, their own resources, creating models and integrating them into our system. So, hey, we give you a standard, and some things can be automated, some things can't. So I think the future goes more toward automation, and that's how it makes this scalable. But right off the bat, yeah, that would be my answer right off the bat, going from fully manual to more and more and more automated until this is really plug and play. Because again, mass adoption, bringing on other creators' projects really requires a simplified UX and more automation.
And so with Meditope, how do you see like the business evolving from there? Because obviously, like I'm assuming your collection's 10K.
That's the plan.
Okay, so usually 10K or less for most projects, right? Right. So obviously, if only 10,000 people can utilize the tech, it kind of limits what you can do with it, right? Like how well known can the tech be if like only 10,000 people can utilize it, right? So where do you see it evolving to in the sense of like, do you see having like a business to business arm of things where you're able to work with projects and say, hey, we can offer this tech to your holders? Do you see you offering this tech to like, because you talked about patents at one point, like you guys have patents on a lot of this stuff. Do you see yourself talking to like, I don't know, Nickelodeon and being able to say like, hey, we can utilize this tech with like the huge, audience that Nickelodeon has? Or do you see yourself working with projects like Clinosaurs and stuff like that to offer the ability to be your dinosaur? Like, where do you see this going?
It'll go in multiple ways. And I have a very, very close friend of mine that says, hey, whatever you think will happen, it's going to be the other thing. And you never know which is going to hit. We've got multiple irons in the fire. There's the obvious B2C play with selling NFTs. I don't see that as the scalable solution long term. I do see the B2B side and offering services for other companies, whether you're a fashion house, whether you're a telecom company, whether you're another project, an artist, whatever. I think we offer a suite of different services, from all the smart contracts we've developed to all these tools that we've developed. That will be the long-term play. We also have a social platform that's coming out. And again, we don't anticipate people to leave TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, come to our social platform. But what it really is it's a tool to utilize our tech. So I will say that the ultimate goal is that regardless of whichever project community you affiliate yourself with, that you'll be able to use your digital identity in our ecosystem. One other thing that, yes, we are going to be selling probably a 10K collection, maybe less, I would love to sell more because that means there's a bigger audience, but our application will be free to use for anybody. You do not need to own one of our NFTs. You don't need to own an NFT. There will be default avatars in there. The whole goal is try it before you buy it. And we want people to, hey, mess around with it, see where the tech is, see where it's evolving, get on this journey with us. I'm hoping that we have many people using it beyond just holders.
So what would be the benefit to the holders if people can utilize the tech? What special benefits will the holders get at that point?
Well, they'll be able to use their unique identity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, okay. So it's kind of like a video game where there's kind of like the pay to play, and then there's this essentially like the default skins that they can use. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then from there, I want to go into like, I guess, in terms of the, I kind of want to focus next on just the NFT space in general. What do you feel like, as somebody who's now been in the field for a long time, somebody who's been, you're detail oriented, you study a lot of the NFT space, you're always paying attention to everything that's going on here. In your mind, what does like mass adoption look like? Because I think that's something that like we often talk about. It's one of the hotbed subjects in this space, right? Mass adoption. And I think it's an interesting thought of like, do I think there's going to be at some point like, 1 million people who are dropping $1 million on an NFT? Probably not. Like that seems. I don't know if the math is mathing on that. So, right. In terms of like, what does mass adoption look like to you?
Couple of different things. So, number one, something that we preach, and that is really a keystone behind a lot of the things we do, and the reason why we do things is that as a company, we believe that we won't see mass adoption until interacting with the blockchain is so seamless that the average person doesn't know they're interacting with the blockchain, and they don't need to know. It's like the evolution of the internet. Like, do you know what HTTPS:// does?
No. I don't even know what it stands for. Don't know any of that. Don't care.
That's the point, right? Yep. So to be able to interact with the blockchain without even realizing you're doing it, and having that be so seamless and easy is our number one priority, or one of our top priorities. I do think it relies on Web 2 players coming into the space and doing it the right way. I think very, very few companies have done it the right way, but creators, builders, and Web 2 companies need to focus on existing fan bases. That's how you're going to bring people over, right? If you have a fan base and give them a reason to come, it's got to be the UI and the UX both have to be better. It's just got to be easy, right? So tapping into those existing fan bases, these existing behaviors. One of the reasons why we're focusing on social media is because, I could throw out a statistic, but whatever portion of the population, the large majority of the population's on social media nearly every day. And it's scary the hours that people put into it. So if you're already there, well, this is an easy, familiar experience that parlays really nicely into the space and will onboard people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, I mean, because when I think about like true mass adoption, I think about we need way less friction. Like currently, we've got so much friction, right? And I think even from like a wallet standpoint, like there's so many different types of wallets, and you're dealing with MetaMask, you're dealing with Phantom, you're dealing with Backpack, you're dealing with Coinbase Wallet, you're dealing with Soulflare, you're dealing with all these different wallets, right? And it's so chaotic. And I think about like, once again, a normie coming in who like, and that is the average person, right? And I think I look at myself and I'm like, I'm a normie in a lot of ways. There's even before we started this podcast, there was something that we were trying to figure out. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I was like, yo, how do I do this? And like, both of us took a second to figure it out. And then like, because I know enough about this whole space, I was like, oh, maybe I try this. And then I tried that and it worked, right? But that's also a year and a half of knowledge that it took to figure that out, right? Yeah. So then I think about the average person coming in who's not going to take the time to understand all of that, and they're not going to understand why certain things are more difficult to do and everything like that, right? But I look at if the NFT space and the crypto space and everything can normalize a little bit in the sense of like, we not as many like black swan events, because it feels like we have one every like few months, and if we could just like chill out for a bit and just like really focus on building the tech without like a major cryptocurrency business shutting down or somebody rugging or somebody stealing funds or whatever, if we could go like a year without one of those events, like that would be epic, and I think would help out a ton. Because I think what will eventually happen is that I think companies like Apple will say, okay, this whole NFT space is not going away. Like because currently right now what you've got these major Web2 brands, and they all start up this whole like Web3 division, right? And then the moment the industry slows down even a slight bit, it gives the higher ups the ability to say, hey, you know what? We tried that, didn't work, get rid of it. And all those people are fired and all that goes to shit, right? Yeah. We just saw it with Instagram, came out and said, hey, we're getting rid of the whole like digital collectible aspect of Instagram, right?
Isn't that wild, by the way?
No, it doesn't shock me at all, because I actually don't think, because I think I look at the parent company Meta and I'm like, I don't think they know what the hell they're doing. I think it's the reason why Facebook is slowly dying off, not slowly, quickly dying off. It's pretty much people use Facebook right now to like stay in contact with people they went to high school with, and that's pretty much it. But like when you think about it, 10 years ago when you met somebody, you like instantly added them on Facebook. Nobody does that anymore. Right. And I already feel like with Instagram, you're starting to lose some of that. And I'm like, dude, it wouldn't take much for all of a sudden Instagram to become completely obsolete. So the way I look at it is I just don't look at Meta, in my opinion. I don't look at them as a forward-thinking business at all. And I don't think they're really good at what they do at all. I think the way they look at it is they'll probably just end up acquiring whoever figures it out, which I guess if you have, Mark Zuckerberg money, you can probably do that. But the way I look at it is like, I look at Apple as forward thinking, and also something where if Apple looks at it and goes, hey, this whole NFT space cannot be ignored. It's too big. There's too many people who care. There's too many, yada, yada, yada. I look at it at that point of like, they'll build in a native wallet. Like we already have a wallet in there, but obviously it's not accepting NFTs and crypto and everything like that. But I don't think it's that far off to be at a point where you could just go in and use your Apple wallet to buy an NFT on OpenSea or Magic Eden or something like that. And I think that would make life 1,000 times easier, right? And that is something where I'm like, okay, we'd probably get, mass adoption at that point. I also feel like the use cases of NFTs would have to expand. Like currently right now, we've got a lot of like the PFP aspect of things. I just don't think we have the ability to keep, you mentioned this a while ago too, but like we can't just keep adding PFP collections. Like there's only so many PFP collections that can thrive. But I think if a company comes in, and I actually said this on a podcast the other day that I recorded with my buddy Chico, that if Web2 companies came in with more of like a membership aspect of things like NFTs, where, if I have this like Nike membership, I'm able to get like 15% off all of my Nike orders as long as I hold the NFT and I get, overnight delivery, right? That right there, great utility. It's a cool membership. As long as the price isn't crazy, I would buy that. If I'm a huge sneakerhead, easy, I would buy that. If you're a gigantic sneakerhead and you're buying stuff on like StockX all the time, easy, that would be a no-brainer, right?
Absolutely.
If you're somebody who's using eBay all the time and maybe that NFT gives you lower eBay fees, like that would be an easy one, right? So it's like that to me is where that makes more sense. I don't see eBay being like, we're going to come out with a PFP collection. Like, why the hell would anybody buy that, right? So those are the things to me where, like, when we get those brands to kind of go, okay, hey, the blockchain tech is not going anywhere, so we're going to figure out our way to utilize that and give more of a benefit to the consumers that we already have and to essentially have more of like a loyalty club and things like that. That's kind of where I see it going. And then once you have like the wallet adoption from Apple, I think that's where all of this goes nuclear. My thoughts. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. And that ties in a lot with things we've talked about. You have the digital identity aspect, which we should get into further, but it's more than just a PFP. It's who you are. It's one login for everywhere you go. And I mean, I agree that Apple is in the best position to see that through. Now, do they get 30% of every transaction?
We're going to have to lower that. But that's also where we're going to have to make it where they decide, okay, hey, this whole NFT and blockchain thing is not going away, so we have to adopt our business model to it, right? But the current App Store business model, I can understand why they make the decisions that they make, right? But I think we have to make the NFT space and like the blockchain and everything like that so unavoidable that they go, okay, hey, we have to implement that. And yes, 30% fees at that point just don't make sense.
Right. On the other hand, I think it would be problematic for them to jump into the space based on where the market is and really the connotation associated with NFTs, right? I mean, that's why you saw Starbucks go digital collectibles. A lot of people, companies, whatever, have started to refer to NFTs as digital collectibles. And I know we talked about this, but I think that's highly problematic.
Why?
They're way more than digital collectibles. I mean, this is also like starry-eyed me, like, oh my God, like smart contracts, NFTs, this is the future, this in terms of distributing media and content. It's absolutely revolutionary. I mean, I think it's down the road, it'll be comparable to the printing press. It just the scale and how quickly you can distribute anything using a blockchain. It's incredible. So, it's more than just a digital collectible. I think it's more than identity. There are so many different use cases, and if you just pigeonhole it into one area of digital collectible, that's hugely problematic, right? Whether it's a membership, is membership a digital collectible?
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to argue that's a digital collectible. It's like it doesn't seem like that term fits for that.
Right. True utility. I mean, it's so niche, and yes, it is a part of the market, but it's not. It doesn't encompass the revolutionary technology that is. And maybe it's just like a personal vendetta I have against that phrase because I know a lot of people love it, but it's like, no, there's way more there. I also think NFTs, I actually wrote an article on this that was in Forbes about how NFTs have a branding problem. And they do. I mean, it's almost become a bad word, right? If you tell somebody that you do a lot of work in NFTs and they're not in the space, they're like, you're sketchy. So I do think that they need to somehow rehabilitate that brand or come up with another phrase. I've been playing around with like, okay, what else do you call them if they're not NFTs or not digital collectibles? Verifiable digital records? I don't know, right? Like what are these? So you have a branding problem, and I don't think digital collectibles are the answer. I don't know if keeping them and rehabilitating the NFT brand is the answer, but something has to happen. And I think Apple saying, hey, we're fully supporting NFTs is probably not going to happen until that works itself out. But they definitely call it something else in the meantime.
I could see digital collectible being the thing, even though I agree with you that like I think that NFTs are far more than just digital collectibles, and I think the use cases down the road, I don't know if the term digital collectible will always make sense for that. But the way I guess I'd look at it is like I think you have to have a term that's easy enough for people to understand, right? And like the number one question I get when I tell people that I have a podcast that's about NFTs, they go, what does NFT even stand for? Oh, non-fungible token. And they're like, okay, like I literally, that didn't make anything easier for me, right? And I think that's a problem, right? I think the digital collectible, at least from a simple standpoint of like, I've told people before, do you own something digitally? And most people say yes. And it's like, okay, that's a digital collectible. Like, okay, it's something that you don't physically hold, but like you own it, right? Like, and I think most people can pretty much understand that, right? And like, yes, there's more detail to it. Yes, there's, a lot of gray area there. But for the most part, I think people can understand the term digital collectible. In terms of the NFT, yeah, I mean, I'm just a big believer that we have to make some of these terms like less nerdy, for lack of better words. Like I've said this often, like I think the term DAO is dumb as hell. Decentralized autonomous organization is just such a mouthful, and like it just doesn't, it doesn't, that's not, we're never going to get people to just accept that. Like we're just not. And so, or we're talking about like a 20-year battle. So like why spend that time when you can just call it a club or a group or something that is a term that has been around since all of us were born, right? Like we don't need to go and reinvent the wheel here, right? So that's kind of my thing, is like this whole space is already difficult enough for people to digest. If we use terms that are at least, digestible, we have more likely that people are going to actually pay attention to it and want to get involved with it, right? Like,
Yeah, I agree.
So, so the term digital collectible, do I think it's perfect? No, but I think it works for the meantime until we have a better answer. But yeah, I think the term NFT sucks. Like it's a cringe term for a lot of people, and it's just something where I think a lot of people don't understand why somebody would spend a ton of money on that. But then once again, you use digital collectible, it's just so much easier at that point, because you can be like, oh, hey, well, there are people who spend a ton of money on like video game skins. There are people who spend money, so many different things, digitally, right? And so that's just much easier to explain. And then I think with that, you have an easier time of like getting people to actually pay attention to it. NFT, oh my God.
Look, I'm hoping something else comes.
Yeah.
Digital records, something that says, hey, this can be a title to a car or a home, a membership, anything else.
Yeah. Well, we'll brainstorm that. We'll be the ones that drop it. How about that? We'll find that term, and then we'll get some trademark action or something. We'll have you file that.
I gotcha.
And we'll, next thing you know, we're Bezos. But okay, so next I want to get back into digital identity for a second. So what are your thoughts on like where do you see that going to, right? When you're talking to somebody about like Meditope and what Meditope does and digital identity and why that's so important, what is your like elevator pitch on why you think digital identity is going to become more and more important as time goes on?
So as Web3 comes to fruition, this idea of an Apple wallet where it's related to the blockchain or blockchains, there will be a form of digital identity that you don't need to carry around a card. You don't need a Costco card, an actual hard card. You don't need your driver's license, your social security card, your passport even, right? You are you regardless of where you are. And I think seeing that on Instagram and TikTok, on Twitter, where you're verifying who you are, and that's how you get your blue check mark now, that's where it's coming. It's saying this person is associated with this account. And I think the blockchain is a wonderful place to do that, right? Especially with Polygon just announced their ZK EVM, and having you be you, all your health records, vote. You could vote, whatever it is, you can have on chain that's only accessible by you and people that need to know that. Now that will probably scare a lot of people at first, but I do think that's where we're going, because I think you can do it in a very secure manner. So in context of our prior discussion on PFPs, right? You don't have to identify with a JPEG in order to have a digital identity. Most people, like if you're a gamer, great. If you're on social media and that's what you want to do and you're in this club, great. You can have a 3D model that plays in video games and goes from platform to platform to platform, goes in Zoom, whatever it's needed. But I do think that everybody will have some form of digital identity to basically be who they are. And I think exactly what Twitter and Instagram are doing with paying and verifying your identity to get that blue check mark are exactly where we're going with that.
So another question on that is like, how there's that ability on like Snapchat has it, and like I think like even your you can even do it on like your Apple ID, where you can create this like little almost looks like kind of like a Wii character that's like looks like you in some ways, right?
Like a memoji.
Yeah. Why do you think that hasn't really caught on? Because I've got a theory, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I feel like a lot of people in my contact list have those. Maybe that just is the 2-year age gap between us. But
what would you consider a lot?
I don't know. I always see suggestions of updating people's contact information with their new emoji or memoji, whatever the heck it's called. I don't think it's caught on for similar reasons to why other NFT projects haven't caught on in beyond a PFP, because I don't think it's that accessible. I don't think it's that usable. Like what do? You can use ARKit, in Apple in a text message, like I can record a video of myself like with just a head. Like that's not like an AR experience, right? They're not really tapping into that experiential element, which I think is absolutely necessary. And that's why Meditope was really founded on this principle of augmented reality over virtual reality, because I always say this, but my biggest fear is the Ready Player One scenario where you're sitting in your mom's basement wearing a VR headset and a haptic feedback suit, and that's how you get out into the world. Like, I would like to see people actually like getting outside, going places, and using augmented reality to enhance their experiences rather relying on virtual reality as a crutch.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think the reason for me why I think it hasn't caught on is a few things. One, I think they're not cool enough that people kind of like. I feel like a lot of times when you have a character that like represents you, you want it to be like cooler than your actual version, right? And so like I'm 5'7", right? If I'm making a digital character, that motherfucker's not 5'7", okay? I'm making him a smooth 6'4", right? And so with that, I'm probably giving him a beard, some, whatever, like I'm chiseled jawline, the whole nine, right? But I think with that, you want to do something that like makes it a little bit different, right? And I feel like a lot of times those things, like, it's kind of frowned upon to make them look super different than you, right? And then with that, I also feel like when it comes to something that you don't have to pay for, I think there's not as much excitement with that. Like, I feel like when you buy something, right? Because like if you play the game Fortnite, there are skins that they give you for free, right? But you almost kind of look at like, oh, that person's a noob. They're rocking a skin that like is a free skin, right?
That's me.
But then when you're paying for the skin, and like if they down the road had like a Fortnite skin marketplace where you could buy, like somebody could create Fortnite skins and you could have the most, like you could have a Beeple skin. Like that would be crazy. If you could have a D-God skin, right? All that stuff, right? Yep. And then if you made it an open marketplace where the market could decide what the cost would be and everything like that. Oh my God, implementing NFTs. That's basically what we'd be doing at that point. But, or digital collectibles or whatever we want to call it. But I think there's something about when you've paid money for something that like when it's also nobody else can have the same one as yours, right? Like I think when you, once again, if you're going back to that Fortnite example, if you're playing in a game and 10 other people are rocking that same skin as you, you just don't feel as unique, right?
Yeah.
And I look at, once again, as those like little memojis or whatever you call them, they're just not unique enough where I can tell a big difference between the two and everything like that. And I feel like, once again, when you're investing money into something, there's also that part of like, I love it so much that I'm willing to invest that money. You talked about when you made the decision to buy your mutant that you really wanted this one mutant. You were willing to pay 0.5 ETH, which at the time was probably like $3,000. So you were 0.5 ETH, so it would have been like $1,500. So you paid an additional $1,500 because it spoke to you, right? And so now it's hard to switch that PFP because you put a lot of money into that PFP, right? So those are the things where I do feel like when you put money into something, and whether it's $1 or $100 or $5,000, there's still something special about that versus something that it's like it's just free and it is what it is, and somebody else could have the exact same one as yours.
I do think the one of one aspect is special, or the limited supply. Yes, I mean, what's the point of spending all this money on a Fortnite skin that 10 other people in the game are using? Even if it's a rare skin that costs more than all the others, other people can have it. So I do think that's a big part of it. I also think that, and maybe this is where the memojis fail, is PFPs tend to either be like badass, which few get that right, or most go like the cute route, right? It's like, oh, this is cute and fun. I like that side of me. It's a little more playful. And it's something that I mentioned Jared Morant's, our artist, something that he really has hit on that he likes about our project, because a bunch of people approached him to do NFTs, and I had to like sell him hard to come on and do this project. So he loves that his fans and just people that like want to feel like a superhero or something can actually do that. Like it's that suspension of disbelief, and you can kind of live in this little bit of fantasy world that is also part of reality. So it's how you see yourself, and it enhances who you are rather than necessarily hides who you are. And I like that element, and I think that's what, I mean, 5 years ago, if somebody told you these prices for JPEGs, you would have thought they were nuts.
All right.
And I did too. I would have, but it's now it's starting to make more sense.
Right, especially as we have more and more use cases for them and
Absolutely.
benefits of them and things like that. So, okay, so here's where I want to wrap this up, because I think this has been an awesome conversation. I'm looking forward to, I'm sure we'll run another episode at some point and keep diving further and further into things. But for you, as somebody you started off building during a bull market, and now you're into a bear market and you're still building, right? Mm-hmm. I want to know, one, what keeps you bullish during times like this? And second, for people who are interested in Meditope and everything like that, what makes you excited about the future of Meditope?
Who is the people that are left make me super bullish. I do believe that we needed this shakeout to get rid of, whether they're bad actors, bad projects. I mean, some people got very unlucky. A lot of people got hurt. But at the end of the day, the perseverance really will bring out the best in all of our projects. So that makes me bullish. The people that I know, I mean, you're here grinding every day. I've met some incredible people, and in such a short time, I've made some incredible relationships. That to me is exceptionally special and makes me very bullish. What gets me excited about Meditope is, you kind of mentioned this. There's so many different use cases. There's so many needs for standardized protocols, actual builders in the space, lots of money coming in from the Web 2 side, and then they just give up so easily. I think the idea of having scalable infrastructure that's designed around communities for communities is going to propel the space much further. And I think that's what we offer, whether it's for existing communities, up and coming projects, or Web 2 brands trying to get into the space and do it right.
There we go. Well, hey, that's a great point to leave this off on, dude. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I knew we were going to have a great conversation because we've had so many great conversations IRL. And that goes to show you why you should just reach out to people who are in the crypto Twitter space and connect with them, because you and I, a few months ago, didn't know each other. Since then, we've had a lot of great times together, and I know we'll have more in the future. And so absolutely, we'll have more great podcast episodes. So, dude, first off, I appreciate you coming on. I thoroughly enjoyed this. For people who want to reach out to you directly, where can they find you? Drop your socials.
Twitter, Jordan Yallen. Me. Nothing exciting.
There we go. And your Metatope Twitter?
And Meditope mostly. It's at the Meditope, TheMetatope. Maybe it's right there.
I'll put it there. Sure.
On all social platforms.
There we go. Well, hey, man, I appreciate this. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll chat with you guys soon.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a blast.
No problem. See you guys.